Hey everyone. So our next guest is Dennis, a candidate from the Florida Libertarian Party. He is running for public office, and I am really stoked to be getting to promote some candidates, people who have been outspoken about Bitcoin and the Federal Reserve and, all that good stuff. So let me bring Dennis on and let's hear a little bit about his campaign.
Good
Hey,
afternoon.
thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited to be able to platform you at the national level and give you a little bit of a boost. So tell us about yourself, who you are, what you're running for, what inspired you to run. Give us the whole spiel.
All right. That's a lot. My name is Dennis Misigoy, and I am running for the U.S. Senate here in the state of Florida. Now, a little bit about my background, besides being a lifelong Floridian, son of two immigrants, and some of the other stuff. Family guy, wife and three kids. Some of the sort of generic stuff. I've been involved with the Libertarian Party since really actively since about the end of 2015, beginning of 2016. First got really involved at a very local level, where running for office in a special taxing district where I used to live in Miami-Dade County. There was a lot of stuff going on, and I remember in particular attending a public meeting, a workshop hosted by the district board at the time. And basically there was a whole bunch of us in the community who were all upset about what was going on. And so everybody was getting up and voicing their displeasure with this kind of project that these guys were pushing. And when I got up and it was my turn, it was basically, I decided to take a little bit different route. And I said, well, what recourse do we have if we don't approve of this kind of stuff? And the response that I got from the district, the district council, the attorney for the district at the time, was basically, it's like any other public office. These people are here supposed to represent you. So you speak to them and you tell them what you think they should do. And if they don't listen to you, you support somebody else when it's election time. And if there's nobody else running, then you got to step up and run. And that's what I did. And I won with 63% of the vote back in November of 2016 to get elected, and spent 4 years on that board. A real interesting experience that I think is analogous, has a very good relationship with what I'm trying to do now, where I spent 2 years basically being unable to do really anything against a hostile majority on the board. The next 2 years after that, after speaking up and setting an example, I was able to inspire a few other people in the community to step up and take some of those other seats. They weren't libertarians, but they were people I could work with, and we were able to do a lot of great things. We were able to cut spending from a bunch of projects that we had by about 78%. We were able to bring a bit of transparency by making meetings a lot more accessible to regular working people in the community. So we were able to do a lot of good stuff. And that was my experience for 4 years. Since then, I've relocated outside of that district, but I'm still, like I said, a lifelong Floridian, born and raised. And I'm running now for the U.S. Senate, the U.S. Senate seat. If you're familiar, there's some prominent people involved in that race. We have an incumbent you might have heard of, a guy named Marco Rubio, former presidential candidate in the GOP. And the likely Democratic nominee, there is going to be a primary on the Democrat side, but the assumed nominee is Val Demings. She's a sitting congresswoman who, former police chief in Orlando, who was pretty prominent in the Biden Veep stakes back in 2020. So two big national figures. I think it's a very big platform, and it's something where I think, especially with Florida being the nation's largest swing state, it's important for us to have a libertarian voice. And I'm trying to provide that. I'm coming at this from the perspective of, as I'm sure probably has already been conversation on here about, a lot of people who came into this movement based off kind of the Ron Paul campaigns back in 2008 and 2012. That was my political awakening as well. That's when I first really got interested and really started to develop some real core principles. And, the biggest issues at that time, I think, are still very relevant today, the foreign policy and the monetary policy. What we see, and I think what's really relevant for what we're talking about today, right now we're facing record inflation like nothing most of us have seen in our lifetime. Some of us are old enough to maybe remember what it was like, but the majority of us, this is, should be a wake-up call for anybody who didn't already realize it. But it's an example and demonstrates the fact that central governments or the adjacent central banks that they authorize really can't be trusted with money, with the control of the money supply. And sometimes I think people, when we talk about things like this and economic topics about, again, about monetary policy, people might think that's a little esoteric or a little strange, or they may think, well, money's not the most important thing. We need to focus on these other issues. And they don't understand that money involves itself in everything, because money is one half of really every transaction in the modern economy. So what effect central authorities can have on the value of your money is, we can't overstate the significance of it. And certainly we're feeling it today. Officially, it's what, 8.5%, but realistically, you go to the gas station, and for a lot of us are paying close to double what we were paying a year ago. That's the reality. Food products have seen market increases in prices. And so it's harder and harder for the most essential things, the things that we really can't, cut out. It's not like, oh, my cable bill is more expensive. This is your gas that you need to drive to work, or to drive to take your kid to school, or your food just to survive. So all of this stuff, it has an impact that goes beyond, anything superficial. This is serious stuff. And even just from a moral perspective, I think every American deserves, I say $1. We're not really talking about $1 per se, but $1 that is worth the same tomorrow as it was yesterday when they earned it. Now, you can't guarantee that there's going to be no volatility, because, there's other forces at work in the world, but you can get away from this idea of debasing the dollar the way that we have. When you start to really delve into it and learn about what goes on, where we just print money from nothing, devalues the dollar, stuff gets loaned out. And so everything's created off of debt, to fund the largesse, largely to fund the largesse of government, to do things like maintain foreign invasions, or to give away money to preferred partners, mostly the little $600 or $1,400 checks that got sent out to the regular people. That's really a pittance of what was done in terms of the COVID relief. And we recognize the harm that it's done, and we recognize that people deserve something better, I think. And the tricky part for a lot of us, certainly the older you are, the more of us who grew up with the idea that, or just accepting as axiomatic the idea that a currency is tied to a nation, the government issues the currency, and that's just the way it was, and there was just that one money there. When the reality is, it's like what a lot of us have figured out about so many other things the government does. It's better done in the marketplace by people offering up better solutions, and let the best solution work out. So there's different alternatives, and certainly a lot of things that people have put out there. I think cryptocurrency in general, and Bitcoin in particular, certainly offers a really exciting alternative to that, in terms of something that's decentralized, that can't be debased by some central authority to fund whatever agenda and these other policies that they would never be able to raise taxes for, that they would never be able to openly tell you that they're going to make you pay for in these sort of deliberate ways. They have to do these kind of accounting tricks and this sort of deception using their control of the money supply. Excuse me. So it's on us to combat that. And this is another thing that I've been kind of mindful of, and sort of in terms of really understanding why I think it's so important for someone like myself, or any candidate, to run and to really try to give voters an alternative, is this. And it's something I was trying to tell people a lot when I was at a protest last year regarding COVID mandates, vaccine mandates for first responders in Orange County over here, which was, I think that, and what I think has borne out, is that public pressure was able to fight a lot of that stuff back. We don't see, from airplanes, passenger airplanes to all these other areas of life, they dropped the mask mandates and this, that, and the other thing, because public pressure has just said we weren't going to accept it, and that works. But the problem, I think, is that still, if we leave the same people in power after we've gotten over this hump, the same people in power who put all that system in place and who expand the power of government every time they get a chance, they will just leverage the next crisis to do as much as they can and push as far as they can. If we want to see real substantive change, and we don't want to go through what we're going through right now as far as inflation, or what we've gone through in all these other scenarios, we've got to get rid of these people from these positions of power. We have to change the situation. And so the only way we do that is by offering up a better alternative. I come in to present myself as a principled libertarian and a serious alternative, in the sense of I'm coming from a background of, be it rather modest, but still experience working in public office where you're surrounded by people who don't want to go along with what you're doing, and as well the principled understanding of really what's at the root problem. Because what you're going to get from the mainstream candidates, from the mainstream parties, the establishment parties, is we're going to tinker around the edges. We're going to still support the Fed, and we're still going to keep these things in place, but we're going to put price caps on gas at the pump or on certain food items, or we're gonna go and expand domestic oil production. Now, there's nothing wrong with expanding domestic oil production. I don't think that should be a policy that's centrally managed by government in the first place. But that's not the reason why these prices have gone up so insanely over the last couple of years. The reason that that's happened is because of what has been done to the U.S. dollar with the creation of so many. And so the only way it stops is if we stop it, is if we're willing to. And again, I'm not just talking about trying to salvage the dollar. I'm talking about allowing Americans really an escape hatch from this, in the sense of, let's get rid of any restriction on people being able to use whatever they want to use as the means of exchange. And that's going to include Bitcoin and all the other sort of alternatives that exist out there, and allow people to figure it out. The market has a much better shot, has the information. It's so widely dispersed, but it will come to a better decision than any central planner in Washington, D.C. ever could. And but that's why I'm running. That's why I'm there, trying to go to Washington, D.C. because, unfortunately, while we, and again, I did focus the first time I ran at a local office, these are problems that we can't quite tackle there. And so that's why I put my sights there, at least in part. So.
Got it. Yeah. So a major pain point for candidates in California, at least, at least running at the state level, is that they can't actually accept donations in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, because we're starting to see governments encroach, and they want to tightly control monetary policy. So I'm hoping that candidates like you who are running at the federal level will be able to start, being mindful, right? Watching for that sort of legislation, staving it off, keeping the government out of our pockets.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, to that point, it's something that I recently got set up myself. So as a candidate and accepting contributions, obviously, is something we need to do. It's something that, is sort of at the, one of the biggest challenges that we face. And it was something that I remember just the one conversation or question I had with Justin Amash when he was not this last year, but the year back in 2021. Our state convention, speaking and kind of asking this question about really what do we need to learn, or what's the difference? What do we need to pick up from that the other parties already do so well? And it really just boils down to resources. And so every one of these mechanisms that we can use, and certainly cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is one of these things. Like I said, I started doing it very recently, kind of getting it set up. Something I've been meaning to do for quite a while. And it's one of these aspects of trying to live our principles as well, in terms of let's be on the cutting edge. We should lead, because libertarians have been at the forefront of so many issues. And I feel like in the public perception, there's not enough sufficient recognition. You go back to what the LP was advocating back when it started in the 1970s, and some of these things in terms of like marriage equality and drug decriminalization. We're not quite all the way there yet on the ladder, but certainly the attitude in this country where the majority of states have decriminalized marijuana in at least some level, whether it's strictly for medicinal use, but so many even for recreational at this point. We were on the leading edge of those issues and continue to be, and this is another issue where we should be on the leading edge of. And so, and that's one of those things where I want to be on the leading edge and make sure that people understand that we're at the forefront of it. I know that there's some fear. I was actually talking to someone regarding sort of this topic, who, and I guess because of some of the stuff that they've done in the city of Miami with related to Bitcoin, where maybe but they have a different set of concerns. But at the end of the day, and I think that they recognize with me, they had concerns about volatility and the value, but again, they're coming at it from a standpoint of just accepting the U.S. dollar as just what the government tells us it is. And that it should be trusted. And the fact is that those of us who've expanded our perspective a little bit to recognize everything that's wrong and everything that's being done to the U.S. dollar, we really see the need for this. And sure, there'll be volatility. There'll always be some volatility, but I think we'll reach a much better equilibrium once we get government securely out of the way. And certainly we want to see that happen, not just for folks who are running for office like I am, federally, but really anywhere. And really, ideally, if we really want to press the ideal, we really want to get to, we would want to have federal legislation, heck, a constitutional amendment that really enshrines it. Because right now we have Article 1, Section 8, I forget which is the subsection, but Congress has the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. But there's no reason why we really should accept that government is in that business. Congress really can't be trusted with this. Certainly the central banks they've helped create can't be trusted with this. So let's trust the people. Let's trust the market can come up with better solutions, and people will trust that which proves itself to be trustworthy. But the central planners have had their shot over and over and over again. It's time to really draw a line, but it's one step at a time. First, we got to be there.
Yeah. So you don't sound anything like Marco Rubio. Give us a couple of major distinctions between you and this other candidate who's out there.
So, in addition to, kind of the recognition of what's the root cause here on this inflation and how we really need to tackle it, foreign policy, he's been a guy who's banged the drums for U.S. intervention in all sorts of places, is always out there using what platform he has to vilify, whether it's Russia or Iran or whomever, and also turning a blind eye to the worst atrocities that we're involved in terms of supporting things like the war in Yemen, the Saudis basically genocide that they're conducting in Yemen, and the LP's been talking about that recently as well. So foreign policy is a big one. In terms of another one that's been obviously in the news quite a bit has been the Second Amendment. He has been, and he may have voted against the most recent, I think, legislation that passed in the Senate, but he's been an advocate for red flag laws from at least, 2018, 2019, has been sponsoring red flag legislation. And in general, so, I mean, in terms of where does he view individual rights, it's a fundamental difference in, and this is, I would say, is generally true of Republicans and Democrats by and large, is that they view the world through a lens of government as being basically omnipotent. It's like it carries the mandate of heaven. So it's up to government to decide, well, what we're allowed to do. They have all the power, and then it's what we get to do is what they say, well, we're going to give you permission to do this. So, for example, drug policy. There was a great quote when there was some talk about federal marijuana decriminalization. The great quote from Marco Rubio was that black market weed is laced with fentanyl, so we can't legalize it, which just demonstrates just a total ignorance of what the effects of prohibition really are, and why some of these sort of things are happening, and why we've gotten so far. And again, after half a century of this policy of a war on drugs, at what point do we recognize that it's failed? Even if you don't necessarily take the libertarian standpoint of say, look, if somebody's action doesn't violate your life, liberty, or property, they don't have that right shouldn't be, those actions shouldn't be considered criminal. Going back to what I said about the Republican and Democrat worldview of an omnipotent government, that's the real difference with us as we talk about, and we're here on Independence Day weekend. I think really at the core of our views is a very American and very fundamental American value that the power of government, the authority of government comes from the people, the people that are governed. And what authority can I vest in government? I can't vest authority in government to say what sort of things you can own or consume or what kind of wage you can agree to work with. And if I don't have powers like that, how can I vest them into government? So that's sort of at the core of a lot of these issues. But certainly, like I said, drug war issues, and economic policy also in general, I feel it's important to say, and I was really impressed at how great a job Republicans, or how successful, I don't want to say great a job, how successful their campaigning was back in 2020, where they really beat this drum, particularly here in Florida. They really beat the drum of Democrats, socialism, radical leftism, and it resonated, particularly with folks, like myself, who were in South Florida, immigrant community that have a real sort of um, a sort of baked in reaction because of personal experiences and family experiences and a real cultural identity that really hates that stuff. But I was surprised at how effective it was. But one of the funny things about it is that Marco Rubio is one of these guys who will constantly kind of throw those things up and talk about Marxism and this and that. But when you actually look at the nuts and bolts of what he suggests as policy solutions, it's all central economic planning. It's government intervention to do this, that, or the other thing. Certainly with no regard for the Constitution at that. One of the things recently with the overturn of Roe v. Wade was, him trying to push out some other federal programs for, and again, someone may see it well-intentioned, but stuff to do things like, federally mandated maternity leave and funded this, that, and the other thing programs. Look, even if you think that's all great ideas, and even if you don't share any of my other values on any of this other stuff and think about what's the best way to achieve these things, if nothing else, we got to look at the U.S. Constitution, which doesn't authorize the federal government to do any of that stuff. And if you're going to sit there and swear an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, you got to do it.
So where can we what's your campaign website? Where can we follow you a little bit more?
So I got it. Excuse me, I got the wrong. I get crossed up over here, but I got the URL on my little window over here. It's misigoy.com. This is the great part about having a really strange last name, is that nobody else goes and gets the domain name. So it's just misigoy.com, just like it's spelled up there. And you can go there. I've got on the front page, we got a link to the latest live stream that I've done. I try and do that usually weekly. We've got the donate stuff up top. We've got the issues page. I keep adding more stuff. You can go and check that out and see where I stand on the issues. Is very different from what you're going to see from the others. As well, in addition, you can follow me on social media as well, at Dennis Misigoy on Twitter, at Elect Misigoy on Facebook and Instagram. You got the links on the page too. There's also YouTube if you want to go that route. So there's a lot of different places you can go. Catch my stuff but check out the website. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And help us out whatever way you can. Well, like I said, it's an uphill battle here.
Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Please give Dennis some love. Thanks a lot. And we'll plan another stream to have you on again.
Thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciate it. Had a great time. Thank you so much. Take care.